All right. Well, Elise and I had coffee a little while ago. She's one of those victims who sent the text message, and we actually had coffee, and she ended up here on the stage. So you never know what happens when you have coffee with me. But if you're a guest this morning, if you're tuning in online for the first time or out in the atrium, welcome. My name is Ryan. I'm the lead pastor here at Crossroads Church. It's great to see you be together. We're going to jump into our talk in just a moment, but I want to give you a little update. Elise and I were talking about the woes of leading nonprofits, and one of those woes is you are the chief fundraising officer. Everybody cheer me on. Okay. So listen, here's the scoop. If you're a guest today, like never been here before, I need you to turn your phone on, doodle, ignore me. This really isn't for you, but we're going to just give a little brief update. We shared with our community early on, it was kind of in the fall, about just where we were as a church in our organization, in our fundraising efforts, and we had a deficit. And this deficit had brought our leadership to a space of asking some serious questions about where, as a church, should we be functioning. We have no debt. As an organization, as a church, you should know that we're debt-free, but it is not a cheap way of doing church, the way we do church. And so we have a rich resource in this building, in this land, and so we're asking questions around where can we do our ministry effectively, this peacemaking work, given our financial constraints and what has happened. And so we shared a deficit that we had. We presented a vision for raising funds over the next 2 years that would carry us through to be able to make good, healthy decisions without the pressure and the stress. And so that really put us in a space where we were looking to raise about $300,000, $322,000 to make up that deficit. And so I've been giving you updates along the way. This is our Peace is Worth It campaign. And so some of you that maybe you've been around for a month or so, you haven't heard an update. But I want to give you a little bit of an update today on where we are, because we presented in February our goal for Easter. And Easter is just 2 weeks away. So I wanted you all to know where you are, where we are. I'm participating, you're participating, how we're doing, okay? Are you with me? We're going to go fast because I know this isn't fun. But our goal for Easter, if you'll remember, was to have 100% pledge. So of the $322,000, to have that in commitments from people, okay? And our goal for Easter was to be at 80%, because I don't know if y'all know this, but when the weather turns nice, nobody comes to church. And some of y'all still only give when you're here. We're not here when you're not here. It doesn't make any sense, but at any rate, that's a whole other issue. Okay, so we know, we got to do fundraising, leading into summer so that we can survive summer. Okay, but that was the goal. So 80%, so about $257,000 being actually received, given. Okay, so here's where we are, all right? Can you kind of see this? So we had two kind of giving buckets where people are giving. So we had our leadership, so our council, and then we had people outside. I went to friends of mine who know the work that we're doing, and I said, hey, do you want to help me eat? And they were like, yes. And so we had some people give from outside of Crossroads that believe in the work we're doing that may not be local. And so our leadership, our staff, our council committed $110,000 before we ever came and brought that. So a third of it was coming from our leadership and outside of our church. And then about 2/3 was coming from our congregation. So here's where we are. Currently, we've had about $68,000, almost $69,000 given from the leadership, and that's at about 62%. Remember, our goal for Easter is 80%. And then from our congregation, it's been beautiful, amazing. We're at 71%, $150,000. Give yourselves a great big hand. Don't you dare clap for yourself if you didn't give. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. That's a joke, okay? It's a joke. All right, so that's where. So for total, right, our total goal is $322,000. We're at 219 given, so 68%. So we got a couple of weeks for a push into Easter to get us to that 80%, all right? So 12% off a little bit. So we're doing great. I mean, seriously, I want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody. I want to say thank you to myself, because I've given too. All right, and I think we're doing a great job, and it's wonderful, and it's nice to see Jimmy with color in his face and sleeping a little bit better. He's been wonderful. Okay, so here's where we are. Just to let you know, over the next couple of weeks, kind of if we want to hit our goal for Easter, to hit 100% pledged, we're at $205,000 pledged. 207, excuse me. We're really, really close to having 100% of it pledged from the community. So we have about $6,000 of unpledged giving. So if you have been around for a while, you've been watching, you've been praying and fasting for the last 7 months going, what should we give? Like, now is your time, okay? To just make a commitment, a pledge. And so if you think about it, like $6,000 over the next kind of 4 or 5 months, really, or if you want to give it between now and Easter, it's like 25 folks giving $250 in a pledge, right? You don't necessarily give it now, but that's the idea, okay? That's just a way it could happen. Somebody could write a check for $10,000 today, and we'll call it a day, whatever, doesn't matter, all right? And then to get to 80% received over the next couple of weeks, we're looking at about $38,000. Now, that's a big number for 2 weeks. You all are super generous. Like every week, just so you know, I think we have about $2,000, $2,500 a week that gets given to Pieces Worth It, which is amazing. It's wonderful. But if you've been thinking about like, how do I make my big splash? Your big splash could be in the next couple of weeks, okay? And I want to say one last thing about this and about donations here and giving here at Crossroads, okay? One thing you will not hear me ever say is mix your spiritual life with your giving, okay? You can do that if you want. And you can think of your giving as a spiritual habit, as a way of honoring your relationship with the divine. That's up to you. The way I think about this is like any nonprofit. If you believe in the work and you are in agreement with it and you find benefit from, make a donation. I don't promise, I don't say if you give, God's going to give back to you. That's the scripture verse that is used for that most often has absolutely nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with grace and love. Give and it will be given back to you, pressed down, shaken together, flowing over. It's about love, right? That's what that passage is talking about. And so as a tradition, we certainly talk about giving and supporting the work, and that's wonderful. But I just want you to hear, this isn't a slot machine Jesus moment, okay? This is like you believe in the work, you want to see it continue here, you want other people to experience what I would consider a healthy spirituality, a modern version of that, then give. That's wonderful. If you aren't sure, if you don't know if this is your community, if you're trying to figure things out, give somewhere else. You should be generous. Like, that's a universal principle in life. You want to be a healthy individual, you need to be generous and not spend everything on yourself, but that's a whole other talk, right? But I just want to make sure everybody's aware that our heartbeat around here is we give because we believe in the work we're doing together. That's why we do that, okay? Any questions? See me afterwards, all right? All that good stuff. So that's that. Are you with me? Once again, I just want to end with, we're doing amazing. This is great. We're really excited. It's given a lot of space, some breathing room. And what really started off this past summer as quite a defining moment has really pushed us forward into and moved us ahead of where we ever thought we would be. So it's wonderful. All right, give yourselves another great big hand. All right. How many of you garden in the room? Any gardeners in the house? I see that hand back there. If you've ever had the chance to go visit Dennis Anderson's gardens, they're like a national monument in Fort Collins. His garden is there. Like Better Homes and Gardens was created because of his garden. Now, let me ask you this question. When you garden, I don't, because everything I've ever tried to plant dies. If you garden and you plant a tomato plant, have you ever, Dennis, had a cucumber grow on that tomato plant? He said no. Has that ever happened to you? You've planted a pepper plant and you got a watermelon. Anybody, you're like, well, that's weird. That's not generally what happens, right? I mean, it's a pretty safe bet that when you sow a tomato seed, right, you're either going to reap nothing, like me, or you will harvest a tomato. Like, fair enough, we get that. So if you want to grow cucumbers, you plant cucumber seeds, okay? Now, here's the interesting thing. Like, that is true not just of our physical world. It's also true of our emotional and our spiritual world. And what we've been talking about over the last few weeks is this idea of love. And what I want to talk about today is that love is a generative reality. Love is creative. But what love creates is love. That if you and I are actually sowing love, real, authentic love, we should reap love. How many of y'all know, and you would raise your hand and agree with this, that when you love someone, you want them to love you back? Or is it like, nope, I want to sow love in their life and I just hope they continue to hate me? It would just be amazing. If I could just pour myself out into this person and they could just continue to just manipulate me, continue to abandon. No, like we want that to flow into our lives, right? We give love, and there is a selfish motivation, right? Because we want to feel that. We want to experience that. And so we all long for love. We long for unconditional love. We long for love that deeply knows us, that understands us, that respects us, all these things. But oftentimes, the love that we feel, what? Feels conditional. Oftentimes, it feels a little distant. Sometimes it can feel like, is this really effective? Does this love transform me or change me, right? Now, there's an interesting quote I want to share with you, and I'm going to share it, and I don't want you to freak out, okay? People freak out when you say the word Karl Marx, okay? So calm down, everybody. Just relax, okay? I know somebody's going to tweet, Ryan's a communist. Like, it's a socialist. Like, that church is worse than we ever thought they were. Okay, so I just want everybody to relax, okay? So there's a book that we've been using, all of our communicators, called The Art of Loving. It was written in mid-20th century. I don't agree with everything in the book. There's some things in it I have staunch disagreements with. But overall, it's a wonderful book, and it's an assessment on the lack of love in our world and the idea of separation. And Erich Fromm is the name of the author. I've quoted it a few times. And he says he's quoting Marx in his book. Now, I've tried to search and find the exact quote from Marx, and I can't come up with it. So Fromm gets quoted as saying, but I just want everybody to know, I'm getting ready to give you a quote from Marx, okay? Relax. Can we take a deep breath? All truth is God's truth. For those of you that maybe you don't even know who Karl Marx is, you just know you're supposed to not be a Marxist. Like you were just raised in a tradition that was like social. Like the idea of caring for people at a societal level is wrong. Okay, that's a whole other question. Okay? So, you didn't even think that was funny. That's how much you don't like Karl Marx, and that was a funny joke. I mean, that was a really, really good one. Okay, but here's the quote. Okay. And see if you could argue with it, right? It's been up there the whole time, right? If you love without calling forth love, what that means is if your love as such does not produce love, and then he goes on, this is kind of a complicated sentence. And he says, if by means of an expression of life as a loving person. So if you wake up and say, I want to be a loving person. I am expressing my life everywhere I go. I want to be known as a loving person. If that's what you're trying to do, okay? And you do not make of yourself a loved person. Now you know it was Karl Marx. It's super complicated. Nobody can understand it, right? So if in your reality of saying, I wake up in the morning, I want to be a person of love. I'm a follower of Jesus, the peacemaking path of Jesus. I want to be a sower of love. And somehow you don't make of yourself a loved person, then your love is impotent, a misfortune. We just close in prayer with that. Right? I mean, that's a lot. That's a little indicting, right? The idea is this, like, if I want to say that I'm a loving person, but whatever I'm doing isn't producing and making me a loved person, then I've got to ask the question about the nature of what I call love. And am I actively doing that? Am I really loving? Am I taking this idea of love as an action? Or am I just simply saying, I love everybody? Am I being performative? Another way of thinking it. Am I just am I just throwing these values out there, but I'm actually not doing anything that produces love, that makes me a loved person? Now, sometimes loving people will make you a hated person, right? We don't live in binaries here. The truth is, if you lean into loving an oppressed group, you will oftentimes find yourself hated by people that are afraid of that group. Right? That's another side of this, that what love can do. But we want to focus on this idea of not a person who hates, but like just in my everyday normal life, the people that I'm around. Am I actively doing it? Like the premise behind Fromm's book is that love is an art, just like drawing or playing an instrument, and you have to practice it, you have to learn it, you grow in it. You don't just wake up. Like the idea of romantic love, right? That's biological in nature, chemically bound. Like that's different than genuine love, right? And we've talked about that over the last 4 weeks. We've given us a framework that says this kind of love means that, number one, we care, right? It implies care. We take responsibility for another. We show respect for that person. And we get to know them beyond facts and stats. Like these, we've said these are like fundamental to what it means to love. So when we say love your neighbor, right, we're trying to pull that out of the ethereal world, the realm of like just sheer theory, and we're trying to bring that into action. So to love our neighbor is to care for them, to take responsibility for them, to be respectful of them, and to get to know them beyond their stats and facts, right? That's core. And so the question we're asking today is, if I'm not reaping love in my life, what am I sowing? Right? What am I actually sowing? Am I sowing kindness? Am I sowing concern? Am I sowing just care? Like, what does that look like? And we want to focus on what happens when we actually sow love. Now, I'm not talking about romantic love, remember. We're talking about active, unconditional, hardworking love. What the Greek word would be agape, right? There's lots of different, like the Greek language has lots of different words for love. Like in our English language, we just use the word love for I love ice cream and I love justice, right? I love ice cream and I love my spouse. Right? We just use that same word interchangeably. In the Greek, there's different words that get translated of love. And so what I want to talk about is this idea of agape love. And agape love is, if you're familiar with, or if you've ever been to a wedding, the 1 Corinthians 13 passage that's always read, right? That describes love. So this agape, this active, unconditional love, it's patient, it's kind, it's not envious, it's not boastful or arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable. Nudge your partner in that one. It's not you. Tell me you love me and then be irritated by me. It's not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. Woo, buddy, that'll change your relationship right there. It doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends, right? That's the kind of love. And we have a beautiful story of Jesus giving this love, of Jesus showing us the power of sowing love into a life that is unloved by the community, and what happens when that takes place. And so if you're familiar with this story, or if you grew up in a church that had little flannel boards, maybe, some of you are old enough to remember those, you probably had the little flannel board set where there was a big tree and a short little dude. What was his name? Zacchaeus. You all are right. Luke chapter 19 gives us this story of Zacchaeus, who was a wee little man. And a wee little man was he. Oh man, we have too many people who've been in church for too long. We need some new people who are like, what are you talking about? Okay, so there's this story, right? And let's just work through this story together. Luke chapter 19, it says Jesus entered into Jericho, and he was passing through it. And so he's walking through Jericho. People had heard that he was coming. And there was a man named Zacchaeus who lived there. And he was a chief tax collector and was rich. So you just got to know, 2 strikes against him, okay? 3 strikes really. So he was rich. Now remember, people who were highly interested in Jesus were people who were wealthy, and Jesus threatened their power, threatened their wealth, threatened their influence, and people who had no power and had no influence, the peasant class, which is what Jesus was a part of. And so, first of all, you got this guy who is immediately like, okay, he's rich, we don't like you, okay? Not that anything changes in life. Rich, we don't like you. And then he's a tax collector, which was a category unto itself, right, of sinner for these folks, because they were traitors. They worked for Rome. They extorted their own people. Even the honest ones were seen as extorting their own people, right? And remember, what made you a sinner was the fact that you didn't participate effectively in temple culture. And most of these peasants couldn't participate in temple culture because of what we would look at as a double taxation problem. They couldn't afford the taxes of Rome, nor could they afford the taxes of Jerusalem. They couldn't do both of those. And so you had to decide, who am I going to pay? And who do you think they paid first? Rome. So they were forced by the very economic structures to be pushed out of the temple And so they were considered sinners. So I want us to be really clear that this word sinner, and Jesus loves sinners, but then he called them not to sin. I think we ought to be really, really careful about bringing moral theism into that conversation, because we're dealing with a societal structure that created a category called sinner. We're not talking about some ontological, like, way God created, law of God, right? We're talking about a system that forced people into the margins, and then that system labeled them as sinners. Why? Because we can make you not a sinner. Here's how I can unsin you. Just come back to the temple, pay your taxes, participate in all the things that generate wealth, okay? I know it's so hard for us to imagine structures like that in our world, okay? This is why Jesus is so important. There's a whole other, okay. Center yourself, Ryan. Okay, so Zacchaeus, chief of the tax collectors, in charge of all the other tax collectors. So not only did he make his money as a tax collector, he also got a little cut of everybody else's tax collecting, okay? Hated by the group. Now it says that he was trying to see Jesus, and Jesus was coming by, but on account of the crowd, remember, let's not be ultra literalists. So what is actually it saying here? But on account of a crowd, he couldn't see Jesus because he was short in stature. The crowd was what? Hindering Zacchaeus' ability to see Jesus, right? Who Zacchaeus was at a metaphorical level was hindered because the crowd didn't care. They didn't like him. They didn't love him. In fact, they were very happy for him to have no part with Jesus. Why should you be a part of Jesus? Jesus is for us, not for you, you wealthy, abusive leader. Jesus isn't for you. Jesus is for us, the ones who are abused by your policies and the ones who have been completely taken advantage of. That's who Jesus is for. So the crowd, it wasn't like the crowd was like, Zacchaeus, you definitely need Jesus. You go first. No, they didn't care. They didn't love him. Not many people were interested in loving Zacchaeus. Not many people wanted to care for. Not many people wanted to take responsibility for. Not many people wanted to show respect for. Not many people wanted to get to know Zacchaeus, his hopes, his fears, his dreams. That was not happening. So Zacchaeus is hindered from Jesus. The crowd doesn't want anything to do with him. So what does he do? He runs ahead and he climbs up a sycamore tree. And he knows that Jesus is going to pass by this way, so now he has a good view. And I think what's interesting is in this action of Zacchaeus, we get a little hint of his life. That he wanted more. He wanted more than his wealth. He wanted more than his power. He had all those things, and there was something there that he knew Jesus offered. Maybe it was the fact that he was excluded. Maybe he had heard that Jesus' message was one of inclusion. But whatever it was, there was something about this Jesus that he wanted to see. And it says that as Jesus comes to that place, he looks up and he sees this old dude up in a tree. He's like, what in the world is going on? And he says, Zacchaeus, hurry up, get down. I need to stay at your house today. So how does Jesus know who this person is? They probably asked, like, who's the guy up in the tree? And like, oh gosh, Zacchaeus, we don't like him. We don't like his kind. Do you have any idea what he's done? Do you have any idea how wealthy he is? Now, Jesus is either on like a fundraising trip. He's like, oh, no. Or when he starts to hear everybody talk bad about Zacchaeus, when he starts to understand, oh, Zacchaeus really isn't part of the community, that there's a cycle here of violence, that Zacchaeus does violence, the crowd does violence, and it just continues to go back and forth like an endless game of 1980s Pong, back and forth and back and forth. And I think Jesus knew, like, well, somebody needs to know that they're loved. And so Jesus displays an active love in that moment. He doesn't teach the crowd generally. He looks directly at Zacchaeus and he says, I'm going to care for this person. I'm going to take responsibility for this person. I'm going to be respectful of this person. And as we'll see in a minute, he's going to get to know this person. So Jesus, he takes this act of love. And his love is also personal, right? He says, Zacchaeus, he calls him by his name. He doesn't address, is there a sinner in the house? Is there a tax collector? Right? He doesn't talk to the crowd about Zacchaeus. No, he's very personal. And he does something that would have been I mean, we kind of can understand it as our culture has become more and more separated and disjuncted. Like, he says, I got to go into your house tonight. And you got to understand, like, in that culture, like, there was a contaminant that took place. Right, to share space at a table was a contaminating reality. It was another way in which the temple culture would control you. Like, if you bring somebody into your house and they're impure, you don't eat with them. This was just how you maintained purity of your people. And Jesus says, I got to go and sit with you. And so Zacchaeus hurries down, it says, and he was happy to welcome him. Isn't that interesting? Zacchaeus was happy to welcome this person who you and I would imagine would be the last person you'd want to bring into your house if you were a corrupt, excluded, predatory tax collector. Right? Like, you're going to bring the person into your home who, like, has the moral authority to, like, read your mail, condemn you, take the side of the crowd. Like, Zacchaeus knows there's something not right with him. He doesn't need somebody to tell him that. Like, the fruit of his life is on display, you know. But he is excited and happy to welcome him. And everybody around begins to grumble. And they begin to say things like, what is wrong with Jesus? He's gone to be guest with one who is a sinner. Now, remember that category of sinner. I want to be very careful. Like, tax collecting in and of itself was not a sin. Right? The sinner was the exclusion, right? Was the separation. We labeled that person as outside. Doesn't mean that Zacchaeus didn't ever do anything wrong. I just think we need to be really cautious with that word sinner and then taking it and applying it to somebody who thinks differently than we do, or looks differently than we do, or loves differently than we do, or goes to a different church, or is part of a different religion. So this guy, Jesus, what is he doing? I mean, the crowd was so blinded by their hate that was so loud, they couldn't even see Zacchaeus' need for love. They couldn't see that what Zacchaeus needed more than his wealth and more than his power was inclusion. That what Zacchaeus was in his job a victim of othering. Who knows, maybe Zacchaeus started out as one of the most honest tax collectors that ever lived. I could see that happening in this story. I mean, this is a man who is desperate to get in touch with Jesus. There's something about him. And maybe after years and years and years of being labeled as the villain for doing his job that he was forced to do by Rome, he just said, oh, screw it. I'm just going to take advantage of everybody. If they don't love me, why should I love them? And so he returns violently. Like, we don't think about some of these things. Like, what created Zacchaeus? Like, what created someone who was okay to take advantage of? Like, what system, what hate, what drove all of that? Maybe the crowd was enraged with jealousy. We deserve Jesus. We need Jesus more than this person does. And so what's interesting is, all we don't know anything that happened in that story. Like, when Jesus goes into the house, like, the story is silent. We have no idea what takes place. It just says that Zacchaeus stood there and he said to Jesus, he said to the Lord, look, half my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. And we don't have any idea what Jesus said, but what we know of Jesus was that he wasn't a demanding person in the sense of, like, threatening and demanding and, like, you better do this. He wasn't controlling. Jesus doesn't threaten love out of him. What does Jesus do? He actively participates in the moment, gets proximate, cares for, takes responsibility for him, gets to know him, and all of that, what does he do? He awakens love. He doesn't threaten it out of him. He doesn't demand it, doesn't control it. He awakens it. It was already there, right? I mean, Zacchaeus' actions in that moment was an act of love. I'm going to give away half of what I have to the poor. If I have done anyone wrong, I will make it right. I will give restitution, right? I will give reparation. Another word that as white people we don't like a whole lot for whatever. But this is what's right there in the text. If I've done anything wrong, if in my actions, and he knows he has, right? It's like, if, Jesus, if. Like what this is going to cost. I'm like, but there's action here. It's an act of love. This isn't penance. This isn't, well, I've got to earn Jesus' love. Jesus had already come into the house. He didn't have to do any of this stuff beforehand. But what's happening? His wounds are being healed. He's being included by someone very powerful, very meaningful. And in the healing of his wounds that he created, right? Zacchaeus created these wounds, right? He created wounds that created poverty in people's lives, created wounds in his own understanding and the humanity of people, but he begins to heal those wounds himself, his actions. His actions. And please take note, he doesn't say, and I'll stop being a tax collector. In fact, I have a feeling he thought, like, from this day forward, I will be the tax collector that everybody hopes shows up at their door. And here's what Jesus says to him, and this is important for those of us that come from backgrounds that use this word salvation a lot, or saved, right? Or you get asked questions about this now. Like, this is what the text, what Luke says Jesus says. Today, salvation has come to this house because he, too, is a son of Abraham. Oh, this is so good. What has actually happened here? This man, Zacchaeus, didn't feel that he belonged. He wasn't a son of Abraham. He was excluded. The crowd didn't love him. His actions made the crowd push him away. But what happened in Jesus' love? He realized, no, he is a son of Abraham, and he does have to take responsibility for the people that are around him, and he does have to care for them, and he does have to bring social mindedness to it. And salvation comes because now he knows he's a part of it. He's included. Because he also is a son of Abraham. Not just the crowd, not just the ones that are oppressed, but the oppressor themselves is a part of it and is included. And then Luke says, for the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. What did it mean to be lost? It meant to be not be a part of, to be excluded from. And what was love? I've got to go where you are. I've got to come into your home because that's where intimacy is. That's proximity, and nobody's willing to do that, but I'll do it. And that transformed and that changed him. And what did it do? It created love. And this begs the question, what is Zacchaeus saved from, and what is he saved by? And for those of us that grew up in a space that said, well, you need to invite Jesus into your heart, and you got to say this prayer, and you got to confess your sins, and then you get to go to heaven. I'm just here to tell you that when Jesus uses the word salvation, it has nothing to do with that at all. That whole structure I've come to believe is nothing more than power brokerage. It's all that is. It's a way to control you and me, to make us think that this group can somehow convey to me some path to eternal bliss. And then I will submit and surrender my will to them. I will submit and surrender my money to them. I will submit and surrender everything to them because they're the power brokers. But that's not what Jesus is doing here. When Jesus actually uses the word salvation, Zacchaeus is not saved from God. He's not saved from God. He doesn't confess Jesus as Lord. He doesn't say, Jesus, you are the Son of God. You are divine. You are very God of very God. I believe in God the Father, Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son. Like, none of that confessional stuff, which is fine. I'm not necessarily saying confessional and creeds are bad. I'm just saying that's not what happens here. What happens here is there's awakening of belonging, and that is transformative. What is he actually saved from? Well, he's saved from the lie of separation. He's saved from his own fears. He's saved from his greed. He's saved from the othering that he was a victim of and the othering that he was doing. It was destroying him. It was destroying the community, right? And how is he actually saved? I would argue that he is not saved because he encounters Jesus' love. I would argue that he is actually saved because he decides to love. That what rescues him from the cycle, from the exclusion, was certainly an experience with a love that was inclusive. But it was his response that he did make a choice and said, I will be a part of things. I won't exist outside anymore. And to exist within is to recognize what I've done to create the wounds. That he was a participant in his own salvation. Why? Because he was a participant in his own death. And we want to turn this whole thing into voodoo. Like, we want to turn this whole thing into magic prayers. We want to turn this whole thing into, we want to call grace, and we want to say, well, grace is just like this free gift that you get, but there is something you have to do for it, which in and of itself is a cognitive problem that we figure out later, right? What is the salvation moment? Is the belief of what has always been true of Zacchaeus. You belong. You are loved. You always have been, you always will be. And as a person who belongs, as a person who is loved, you need to take responsibility for the people around you. You need to love them. You need to care for them. And that's what Jesus did when he entered into his home. What did Jesus do? He sowed genuine love and he harvested it. And I have to believe the rest of this story with Zacchaeus is he's going to sow all this love and he's going to harvest it back into the community. So here's what I don't want us to miss. Love creates love, and that leads to transformation. Every one of us in this room needs to be transformed every day of our lives. As soon as you don't think you need to be transformed, you're a lost cause. I mean, that's harsh. But if you and I can't humbly come to life, recognizing, of course I'm not where I need to be. Of course I'm not everything I want to be. Of course there's a better version of myself 5 years from now, 2 years from now, 30 minutes from now. Of course I can love my children better. Of course I can love my spouse or my partner better. Of course I can love my neighbor. Of course I can do. Why? Because love is an art and we grow in it. And I humbly come to the table that of course there's things I can learn. And so the way I'm transformed is that, wow, I've received and I now know that this divine mystery includes and loves at a deep level. And so now I give that away. I love in the same manner. So 1 John 4:16 and 19 says this. So we have known and believe the love that God has for us. And then it's like the writer changes their mind. It's like, wait, I'm not saying that right. I'm not saying this right. We've known and believed the love that God has for us. But hold on, like here's the thing I really want you to get. Actually, God is love. It's not that God loves, it's that God is love. And if you abide in love, you abide in God. So abiding and actively participating and being present with it, sowing it, reaping it, you are actually in God. And then it says this, we love because God first loved us. And that can be difficult for those of us who have kind of moved beyond like a very Zeus-like moral theistic understanding of God that was present in this culture that this was written in, to say, okay, how do I adapt that to my understanding that, well, wait a second, like once I understand that I am truly loved and embraced by a universe that I don't have to be afraid of, an enchanted world, an enchanted universe that is filled with the goodness of what we call God, and it's a mystery, then I can take a breath and I can include everybody else in it. And I can love and sow because I know that first of myself. See, divine love, Jesus' love, it transforms us. Why? Because it takes responsibility for us, it cares for us, it respects us, and it knows us. And it is a great mystery. I have no idea how it works, but I've experienced it. And many of you have too. Even in some of your negative church experiences, one of the things that many people wrestle with when they're walking out of one form of spirituality into another is they question their divine experiences. And they say, were those made up? Has anybody ever done that? Were those just were those manipulated into me? I want to tell you, no, they weren't just manipulated into you. That the divine is universal and user-friendly, and you don't have to throw away experiences that came out of bad circumstances and bad situations. What you ought to do is bring to the table and say, what was the fruit of it? If the fruit of it was it produced fear in my life, then throw it away as a manipulative. It wasn't love, it was something else. But if it produced love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, then you go, the divine was at work in there. Whatever it was called, whatever it produced, however I was manipulated, God was gracious enough to be present in the midst of it. So we don't have to throw away our experiences. We can assimilate them in a healthy way. And you're going to be the judge of that. You're going to know your experience. Right? And that's the beauty of what love actually does. So in your everyday normal life, okay, let's just bring this home real quick. We'll have communion together. We'll center this whole thing around Jesus. In your everyday normal life, remember this. Only love has the power to produce love. You cannot sow anything else and reap love. You just can't do it. If love is holistic goodness, I'm not talking about romantic love that makes you, I'm talking about love that transforms and changes and shapes and strengthens and heals. Like the only thing that can do that is love. This is when we talk about, when we give that beautiful phrase that Dr. King said, right? Hate cannot drive out hate. It can't do it. Hate will only produce more hate. You sow it, you reap it. It is what it is. But love can transform that. And that's why Jesus said, hey, guess what? You're going to face persecution. Because this isn't voodoo. Like this is the hard work of peacemaking. And so I want to encourage you, lay at the foundation of your life. Love produces love. That doesn't mean I agree with everything. Doesn't mean I, wholeheartedly endorse everyone. No, it just means I ground it all in love. And then I want to encourage you to be a life-giving person. Be a life-giving person. What does that mean? It means give of your life to others. That's what love does. Love is giving. Love is generous in that sense. And you have to give of what gives you life. That's a sacrifice. It's not giving your life in the sense of I'm going to die, but you got to give away what you love so that it can be returned back to you. So you say, give of your joy. You have something that brings you joy, find somebody else that it brings them joy and give it away. Be a life-giving person. Give your life away. If you have an interest, bring somebody into that interest. If that interest gives you life, sow it into somebody else's life. Bring somebody along. Give of your knowledge. Give your life away. See, sometimes we grow up and we're a part of these spiritual or religious environments that say, give your life away. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And for a lot of places, it means, well, be at church every day. Volunteer till you hate the church. No, and this is about your everyday normal life. Like to be a life-giving person means you give of your life to others. Can I just be real honest? My dream for our church would be that it's filled with people and we do nothing as a church. Wouldn't that be good? Like we did nothing. Why? Because we're just busy out there loving and we're being filled up and encouraged here and we're always going to do things. I get that. But this idea that we're out giving of ourselves in our everyday normal lives. See, Acts 20, Paul talks about it like this. He's quoting Jesus, right? And he says, I've shown you in every way by laboring like this. Paul, he's laboring. His work, it's active, it's out there. And he says, I've shown you in every way by laboring like I have that you must support the weak. And then he says, remember the words of the Lord Jesus when he said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. See, love is a giving. Sowing is a giving. So you sow in others what you want to grow in yourself. Sow in others what you want to grow in yourself. And just recognize if you're sowing into someone hate, if you're sowing into someone disharmony, if you're sowing into someone judgment, guess what? You will receive that back. I don't know how else to tell you that. It's just what happens. I have massive issues with lots of things that are going on in our world today. I completely disagree with some of the policies that are taking place in the administration. But I know that if all I do is sow hate and judgment, that's all I'm going to get back. Doesn't mean I can't disagree, but I got to do things. I got to participate in a way that doesn't create more victims and doesn't victimize myself. Because the more that Zacchaeus oppressed, the more that Zacchaeus took advantage of what happened to his own life, the more he was pulled away from community. And we see this all around us. The more people get entrenched in their political party and their affiliation, the more people get entrenched in their religious denomination, the more people get entrenched in their identities and their labels, the less effective we are as a community. I was thinking the other day, what would it look like in America if we never had political parties? What would it look like if nobody ever had the idea to divide everybody ideologically? Certainly we would disagree, and so we'd have different ways of being, but I wonder what would happen if it wasn't about defending an ideology, a system, a name, a label, right? I just wonder how much that affects things, and that's what you sow into. So when you sow into that as a divisive reality, it just comes back. So if you want to grow patience, you got to sow patience. Woo-hoo. That one doesn't feel good, does it? Some of y'all know, like, because your prayer, like some of y'all are like full-on prayer people, which is cool. And you're like, Lord, you got to give me patience for, this person at work. And then this person is like all of a sudden in every meeting with you. This person is like asking you to go out to lunch. This person is now your boss. And you're like, what the heck, God? And the universe is like, didn't you ask for patience? And what we really mean is like, change this person, which you have no control about. You have all kinds of control over changing you. Like Zacchaeus, he had all kinds of control over himself, and he saved himself. I know that's a scary thought, but he didn't save himself from God or from hell. He saved himself, from the culture. You want joy in your life? Sow joy. You want acceptance? Sow acceptance. That's how this works, because love is generative. So examine your heart. Who is it? Who is it that, nope, forget it. They don't get my love. See, like, this is the hard task of following Jesus, and this is what heals the world. Going to church, giving in the offering, having this building, having all the right doctrines, that does not change a thing. It doesn't. Makes us feel better. But what Jesus offers is something that has to fundamentally change everything of what we do if we really want to participate in the healing of the world. And we recognize that's what it's called. Who would have thought that the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1991 would drop some serious wisdom? What did they say? Give it away, give it away, give it away now. Give it away, give it away, give it away now. Give it away, give it away, give it away now. I can't tell you if I'm a king or a pauper. Give it away. This is what it says. Greedy little people in a sea of distress, keep your more to receive your less. Red Hot Chili Peppers. How many of you knew that was in the song? Like, you've heard that song over and over again, and most of us don't even know it's in there. Like, dropping wisdom. It goes on and says, unimpressed by material success. Does anybody know the next line? If you know the next line, you don't have to give in the offering today. I'll motivate you. This is what it says. Love is free. Love me. Say hell yes. So instead of amen, let's just say hell yes today together. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Come on now. This is the new Ryan translation. So in your world, in our world, does this make the world a better place? Does this make me a better person? Do I need to even ask this question today? Sure. Yes, it does. Because when we love, when we sow love, what happens? Separation, fear, and othering, they lose their power. And it is the power that destroys you. Like, forget about anybody else. We're not talking about saving the world. I'm talking about saving you. Right? It's the separation that is affecting you and me by my own not sowing of love. And when we do this as a group, right, community is built, hope is found, joy is released, and love is generated. I want to invite you to stand this morning. If you're able to, we're going to have communion together. Everyone is invited to these tables. We're going to sing 2 songs. And as we do this, I want to ask you this question. What is it that God's inviting you into today? This is the center point, by the way, of our experience. Like, I'm just the prelude to this moment. I know I'm a long prelude, and I apologize for that. But this is where I believe the mystical, transformative work of the divine happens, because we bring an expectation to it. So what is it that God's inviting? As you have these elements today, what is it that God's inviting you into? I hope it's to first and foremost trust that you are loved, that you are welcomed by the divine just as you are. That is a reality that exists because you are breathing, because you came from God and you will return to God. And that might be just the hardest thing to actually believe. That you have to do something, you have to say something, you have to pray something. Surely I have to do something. And the message of Jesus was like, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything, you are. Now, if you want to realize it, if you want to experience it, there's a way to do that. And it's called love. I hope that you will allow divine love, right, to create love in you so that you can then go and create love in others. That you'll open your heart to that as an art form. Give yourself permission to fail at it. Give yourself permission to accidentally hate. But open your heart to come back to, maybe that wasn't the best way to respond. That's just transformation. That's just how it works. And then I want to encourage you to think of a person in your life that you would label as a challenging relationship. Don't look at anybody. But just think of a challenging relationship, and I want to encourage you to take what we've learned over the last 4 weeks and to put it into practice, to think of that person and to actively care for them, to actively take responsibility for their success, for their well-being, to be respectful of their choices, and to gain knowledge about them and just see what happens. See what happens. We're going to sing a couple of songs that I think are really beautiful that tie into this idea of what we're called into. And this first song is called You Have Called Me Higher. And it says, you've called me higher, you've called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me. See, Zacchaeus, the love of Jesus led him out to others. And it would have been super easy for Zacchaeus to be like, I am loved, thank God. And then just go on back to whatever he was doing. But that's not what happens. He goes into something else. And then we're going to sing this song that the divine is bigger than we ever thought, that we could ever imagine. And in that, like there's freedom from worry about God and the nature of God. And there's freedom to just be present and to be transformed by that. And so you're invited to these tables today. You don't have to understand it. You don't take a class here. This is a simple recognition that the divine is willing to go to extreme lengths to help you and I know that we are loved. And that's what the body of Christ broken for you and the blood of Christ shed for you. That's how it was interpreted 2,000 years ago as we enter into this season. It was interpreted within their cultural context as the greatest expression of love that their God could give to them in the sacrifice. And so we hold on to that meaning even as we interpret it and apply it in new and powerful ways for our present realities. The body of Christ broken for you, the blood of Christ shed for you.